Women in pop culture are often represented in different ways depending on their country and culture. This video will look at women in 4 different countries and how they are represented. By looking at women in Iran, India, Turkey, and China, it can be seen how pop culture is both different and similar to North American pop culture.
Norma Claire Maruzzi explains how for women currently living in contemporary Iran, the political is personal. The most intimate life choices of the past 20 years have been directly shaped by political as well as social and cultural factors, and in more subtle ways than the immediate Western assumptions concerning viewing or Islamic patriarchy. Government prohibitions on film violence, on any physical contact between female and male actors, and restrictions on the import of mainstream commercial foreign films has led to an extremely innovative national film industry for Iran. But film is also one of the main vehicles through which the complexities of contemporary Iranian private life has been explored, particularly the complexities of women's lives. Many Iranian films include a similar storyline that is basically the woman being unhappy with her husband, and there is another force that helps her escape from him. But of course, she cannot do this all on her own. In the film Two Women, the woman stalker ends up killing her husband so she can escape him. Maruzzi states that most Iranian women approve of this film because it shows how women are able to escape an unhappy marriage, and it shows an accurate emotional representation of their own experience under the specific historical, cultural, and political conditions of the early years of the Islamic Republic. But what kind of message was being conveyed by a film that portrayed a woman who could be saved from her own passive victimization only by an unexpected actions of a man? This film tells Iranian women that they cannot get out of a difficult situation without another man's help. The fact that women think of this film as liberating definitely indicates a different view of feminism in this culture. For most of us, we would think of these films as unprogressive compared to Western films, but most of our films are actually quite similar. They're just portrayed in different cultural contexts. For example, in Western films, the amount of male heroes rescuing women is far more than the amount of independent women that can save herself, and thus we cannot say that Western films are far more progressive than Iranian films.
Bollywood films represent India as a progressive country. Although, is this progress simply an industry moving towards Western values? Arguably, Bollywood has shaped and expressed modern India to an extent that no preceding art could achieve. Early 60s Bollywood films would portray women as either traditional Indian women or modern Indian women. The modern women were either defeated or reformed. Women were represented as mere wallpaper in Bollywood films. Issues of gender, gender-based violence, femininity, and women's rights and sexuality were often ignored. Patriarchy played and still plays a central role in Bollywood films, as it is a dominant force in Indian society, just like it is in Western countries. In modern Bollywood films, there are 2 types of women portrayed in films. There are the modern and westernized women who will wear typical American girl clothes, and there are the more traditional Indian women who will wear traditional clothing. The westernized woman is often portrayed as the bad girl, who is lazy, a gold digger, mean, sexualized, and who neglects her family. The traditional Indian woman is often portrayed as hardworking, sweet, and simple. Also, the westernized woman is the one who is more outspoken and speaks her mind, which is considered a negative trait for Indian women. As progressive as India is, they still have not achieved a modern view of women as acceptable. Although there are still the traditional values of Indian culture, the Bollywood industry is becoming Americanized. Bollywood movies are beginning to be shot in the United States. The recent Bollywood movie, Flavors, was shot in New Jersey and is in mostly English. In the film, an Indian man is engaged to a tall, blonde American woman. This shows that the cultural films of Bollywood are becoming more and more westernized, from the plot to the production of the film.
More than a friend, you were close to him very much.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at, but don't worry, we are going to be happy.
You're not an Indian, but you're a very nice girl.
Take life like it.
Don't mind, I'm elder to you, no? That's why I'm saying all these things.
Women have been part of Turkish cinema since its beginnings. Gonal Donmez Collin states that about half of the first fiction films made in Turkey were about women, although women's representation in these films were far from favorable, the most common being the seductress with loose morals and an unappeasable sexual appetite. These women would pay for their sins with their lives. This was common in Turkish society in which patriarchal control was sustained through the family. Also, Turkish women were played by Armenians, Greeks, and White Russians because Muslim women were not allowed to be actors during this time. Yeşilçam, the commercial Turkish cinema that became prominent in the 1960s, projected Western lifestyles through the body of the women dressed immodestly, drinking alcohol, dancing with men, and having illicit sex. Women at this time were not even allowed to go view these films, and that is why the portrayal of women as a mere sex object was popular, because that is what men wanted to see. Collins states that by the mid 1980s, however, social and economic changes in the status of women changed the way Turkish films were represented in films, and then there was a rising demand for women's films. Also, there have been women film directors who have tried to make films about lesbianism or even just trying to portray a modern and independent Turkish woman, but these films were not able to be released, and therefore it is hard to say if the representation of women in Turkish films is actually accurate. With men controlling the film industry and controlling how women are portrayed on film, the difference between Turkish films and Western films are not so different after all.
In China, there appears to have been a trend towards the westernization of the media. Although there are Chinese-produced movies and television shows, they often depict American women as the heroes. These American women are used as the standard of beauty and are depicted in advertisements and fashion magazines. Also, like North Americans, the Chinese are constantly swamped in a multitude of advertisements, billboards, videos, and magazines. Vogue China, more often than not, features American actresses such as Nicole Kidman and Kate Winslet on its covers. While the advertisers are starting to tap into the giant market of China, they are often using Western ideas to entice these Chinese customers. From the late 1970s, China has produced both indigenous television programs and shown foreign ones. Since the 1990s, television drama has remained the most popular form of entertainment. Soap operas are created in China for Chinese audiences, but very closely resemble the American counterparts. In a Chinese movie, which title translates to Women from the Lake of Scented Souls, depicts a woman who has a successful business venture selling sesame oil. At the same time, she has to deal with many domestic issues. She has a handicapped husband, a son with learning disabilities, and a dysfunctional family. This is similar to a story that might be depicted in a North American movie. There is also a tendency to show Chinese people in a foreign setting. This is shown through some popular Chinese movies such as Beijingers in New York, A Chinese Woman in Manhattan, and My Experience as a Lawyer in the US. Most often in these films, the man is competing with other men for both capital and women. In China, there is also a tendency to show Western culture in magazines. Fashion magazines often depict white women. These white women function as an object of male desire and female mimicry. In the TV program Foreign Babes in Beijing, the main character, a Chinese man, runs away with an American student who is visiting Beijing. The man, who is previously married, still assists his wife with raising their son, although his wife is never able to remarry. The American is shown as being fun, promiscuous, and carefree, while the Chinese woman is shown as doing domestic tasks and taking care of responsibilities. The American babes are shown as the winners of the show, while the Chinese women remain marginalized.
As Dr. Strangelove writes in his book, Watching YouTube, in all instances of women's representational practices, there exist contradictory forces that reinforce and undermine dominant notions of femininity. There are many different perspectives of femininity around the globe, and as seen in this video, women across the globe face many of the same issues as North American women.